I will now give you some concrete examples of how EU relations with Africa works. There is not a one-size-fits-all description of how EU foreign policy making towards Africa is done. It's an idealised model. The European External Action Service acts as a coordinator, receiving the input for the line on foreign policy from the Member States in the Council. The Commission manages EU aid and leads on several policies, including trade relations. The European Parliament has a monitoring and oversight role, notably on the way that the EU spends its money. It can influence decisions and hold the other institutions to account. And the EU delegations are the face of the EU in Africa. In reality, things play out differently. The first example is about programming EU aid in a sub-Saharan African country. At the start of a new budget cycle, the EU allocates funds to different countries according to the EU's political priorities and the country's needs. Deciding how much money will be spent in each country involves several actors in a process called programming. This example aims to give an overview of the political dynamics at play, rather than explain step by step the programming process. First of all, the EU delegation analyses the country context to have insights on obstacles against development and reform and what actors may be worth supporting. The operations section is the main actor. The input of the political section varies. The country's national development plans are also examined, and the EU delegation engages in dialogue with the country's authorities. Allocation of funds needs to respect the principle of country ownership and contribute to the country's development policy. EU member states are consulted throughout the process. Domestic accountability actors, civil society and authorities are consulted. A legal obligation under the Cotonou Agreement ensures the respect of democratic ownership. However, in practice, participation is often limited to an information meeting, and the EU is taking steps to improve civil society participation. When consultations have finished, EU delegations send proposed sector priorities to headquarters. Headquarters verifies that the country programming is in line with EU policy guidelines. In fact, although sector concentration reflects international efforts for more effective aid, as a policy it has proven very problematic in practice. Sometimes there is a mismatch between EU and African countries' priorities and interests. In some occasions, headquarters has asked EU delegations to change cooperation sectors. When an agreement is found, the national indicative programme is signed off by the Commissioner and the party country government. Then the implementation can start. Let's move to the second example, the adoption of conclusions by the Council. When there is a crisis in a country, such as the events in Mali, Central African Republic, Egypt and Sudan, the EU monitors the situation through its delegations. The EU member states discuss the case in the Council at the level of Political and Security Committee. Member states may decide to have a common EU position and issue Council conclusions. Each member state will defend its interests and position. Member states with an historical legacy in the concerned country will be generally very vocal. The External Action Service chairs the meetings and has to find a compromise text. The Council conclusions, in this way, would reflect some of the viewpoints of member states in some form or another. The conclusions are adopted by the Foreign Affairs Ministers in the Foreign Affairs Council, and they're published on the Council's website. The High Representative usually then holds a press conference where she presents the conclusions.